We have seen tonight an array of arguments to prove the existence of God, a hidden God who does not want to interfere with our free will by making us aware of him, and has a hidden purpose for not alleviating suffering in the world. The only logical conclusion is that there is no God, and such arguments are an insult to rational minds. I would like to end this lecture with an existential theist statement on evil and suffering in this world, and the putative reconciliation with such suffering when the previously hidden God reveals his purpose and creates happiness and peace for humans in the end. In Fyodor Dostoevsky's great novel, The Brothers Karamazov, 1880, the atheist brother Ivan confronts his younger Christian brother Alyosha with a question concerning evil in the world. I call on you, answer me. Imagine that you yourself are building an edifice of human destiny with the object of making people happy in the finale, of giving them peace and rest at last. But for that, you must inevitably and unavoidably torture just one tiny creature and raise your edifice on that foundation of her unrequited tears. Would you agree to be the architect on such conditions? Tell me the truth. No, I would not agree, said Alyosha softly. The defenses for the hidden God, hidden purpose, unbelief, and evil in the world fail. Thank you for your attention this evening.
Very good. Yeah, there was a lot. There's a lot in there.
I crammed it full. It's incredible how many arguments there are in atheist circles. I don't think enough attention is paid to them. Of course, you know, Sam Harris and Dawkins and even you know, Dennett have been really great. They've promoted atheism in a way that people understand and get, and especially young people, and it's changed a lot of people's belief systems. So, I mean, all due credit and with all due respect to them, but there are complex arguments going on in, you know, theological circles that come down in a watered version to theist people and what have you. And I think we should be aware of those arguments so we can counter them.
Who is doing that, though, on our side? Who is answering Platingo?
Michael Martin, the late B.C. Mackey, Theodore Drange, Peter Angelus, Quentin Smith, Michael Tooley, Andrea Weisberger, and all their different ways, and then there's more on AtheistScholar.org. We have a whole range of really brilliant, you know, thinkers, atheist thinkers. And, you know, we're not hearing about them. And this disturbs me. When I started studying the issues, I realized there were so many, you know, atheist philosophers that I had no idea about. And I think that's sad.
And they're writing in response to these theologians?
Yes, yes, or other theologians.
Because in some sense, I get that they moved on, that philosophy has moved on beyond whether there's a God or not.
General philosophy, yeah, because they're kind of like, you know, post-God.
Post-God.
Yeah, post-atheist or post-God. But our philosophers are still working to counter theistic arguments. There's little field within the field, and it's more theology. You know, theology, philosophy, it's a mix. Like I just wrote some notes before I came in. The late B.L. Mackey's volume, The Miracle of Theism, and that's referred to in the book list. Arguments for and against the existence of God is a wonderful compilation of theist arguments for God. Mackey knocks each one down like a ninja warrior. He is not only an extremely easy read, well, he's not an easy read, he's hard, but a very rewarding one. What every theist argument there is practically in his book, in that particular book. He's really a wonderful thinker. He really, you know, attacked their possessions with a lot of logic, some humor, and, you know, you should have a little experience in philosophy before you start reading him. But he's extremely rewarding. And there he was. He wrote it all, you know, he wrote it all down. In fact, there's theologians who claim that the way Mackey, you know, the listing of so many theistic arguments that Mackey, you know, like puts down proves that there is a God. Because look, he put all these things down, but he defeated all of them.
This is about the third time I've heard the lecture tonight, and I keep coming back to a lesson that I was taught in elementary school, Catholic school, when I did go there. And whenever we would have a question about something, and I can't think of it specifically, just think about it. Why can't I, how did God walk on water? It's not impossible. Jesus didn't walk on this, impossible. You must accept this on faith.
Yes.
These are tests of faith. When the mountain blows up and turns out to be a volcano and all the hot stuff comes out and kills you, it's a test of your faith.
Yes.
When the army comes through and takes all your crops and kills all your cows and your sheep, it's a test of your faith.
Right.
So the question is should we even be asking, is there a God or not, right? Because if you're a person of faith, you don't even ask that question.
Yeah.
No, because that in itself, that argument itself is a test of your faith. Why would you even question
why would
that?
you question? Right. So is this a modern debate that we're really having, whether there is a God or not?
Well, according to the experts, as we discussed when we did atheist history, you know, that this comes about from about the late 1700s.
Yes.
But I think that people were arguing inside themselves and maybe quietly, one or two friends together.
Because I'm struck by the fact that it's a debate in theory. It's not related to any religion, really. You mentioned Christianity, but mostly all of these arguments you mentioned were this theoretical God that wasn't actually associated with one religion or another.
Right.
And to me, that struck me as this is a relatively recent occurrence where you would be debating the truth or fallacy of this outside of a religion.
Yeah.
So before you would say, you know, is the virgin birth real or not, you know, you know, should I convert to Christianity or should I convert to Islam? That would be your debate, not whether does God exist, but does this religion tell me the truth?
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
So I think it's recent, maybe the 1700s or the Enlightenment, when we had this now phenomenon of we can separate religion from God.
Right.
See, I think that's
yeah,
recent.
that's a very good point, Norm. Yeah. But of course, the argument still goes on, what religion should I belong to? I mean, there's people like wandering around all the time. They go to different churches.
Which one is my pathway?
Yeah.
What is my pathway to God?
But this New Age spirituality is God exists and He's my personal God. He's not the God of Christianity. I have a personal, direct relationship with this outside of organized religion.
Yeah. See?
So that's, I think, our challenge is how do you address God outside of religion? See, because it's much more difficult, isn't it, to say, you know, there is no God. It's easier to say that Jesus, you know, is just nonsense. It's hard to say there is no God.
Yeah.
So, and I had some more comments. I have lots of comments and questions.
Well, I bet.
Well, first of all, on the ontological, you can clear up something for me. It isn't just, the ontological argument isn't just the universe exists, therefore there's a God.
Okay.
Is that true?
Oh, not quite. No, not quite. That's kind of like, that's part of the cosmological.
That's a cosmological argument. Yeah, ontological.
You know what, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, the ontological. It's simply, wait a minute, let me get my papers here because I want to read it exactly so I don't confuse the whole issue. Yeah, God is a completely perfect being. Existence in external reality is necessary for God to be the completely perfect being, because if He did not exist externally, He would be lacking something, actual existence. It would not be the completely perfect being, which He is. Therefore, God exists. It doesn't make any sense. And then also the terms for that. you're all-powerful, omnibenevolent, omniscient, and so on. Like Calvin against us, he doesn't even begin to know how to refute this argument because none of the terms have been defined. I mean, it's a whole... And then there's another way, except I hope I don't confuse the issue that, you know, if we can think of a completely perfect being, that means that he exists, or it exists. And that's tricky too. That's been a philosophic position for a lot of things. You know, if we can think of universal morals, then they exist. Well, it doesn't.
No, we can think of fantasies.
Yeah. C.S. Lewis had a silly argument. It's one of, I mean, I had to leave out a lot of arguments or I've been here all night, but that it kind of goes along with this thing, but it's that since we can imagine and want food and drink, then food and drink actually exist. So a lot of people want to believe in a deity, so the deity exists. I mean, you know, these things make no sense.
But even the question, though, does God exist, would be a value statement that the truth matters, right?
Right,
the truth
yes.
is important.
Yes.
And people just assume that that's something that's important, but that in itself is an assumption that the truth is important.
Well, see, what I guess finally, you know, from what I've heard people argue, the fact that that it's a vital question to so many people because, you know, if you're an atheist, you're saying God does not exist. If you're a theist, you're saying, well, yes, God does. And, you know, one of you is going to be wrong, probably. And, you know, if you're an atheist and you're wrong, you know, you are cooked, you know, basically. The theist is probably going to be saved unless, you know, he or she, you know, assents to your arguments finally.
So then wouldn't it be more difficult to defend the proposition that God is evil? That there is a God, but he is evil?
Yeah, that's how they, some of the Gnostics, they didn't quite say he was evil, but it was, I think we've talked about this before, it's very clever. They came up with some kind of hierarchy of gods and what have you, and they said that our world was created by this demiurge.
He's a nasty one that got through.
Yeah, or incompetent too. And, you know, he just kind of got loose and didn't pay attention to the real God someplace and just created this, you know, crazy world, and look how screwed up it is, which is, I think is kind of funny and actually is pretty logical. So what they're saying is there wasn't a real God.
An interesting way to handle the problem would be one of the inconsistencies in the world and the chaos and you know.
It's pretty funny.
People getting chopped up and so.
And by the way, I hate to become a bore, but as I, for other topics, as I research the Gnostics more, just a little bit, and I haven't done a whole lot, but I'm becoming more aware of how prevalent they were in early Christianity, and their ideas were kind of like wiped out and put to the side. You know, and I'm quite amazed. That was a very, very popular philosophy.
In Egypt?
All over.
All over, not just.
Yeah, Egypt, it was very prevalent. Yeah, because remember there were these Christian pockets all over. But, you know, the early church, as Elaine Pagels points out, was like very much more fluid, and there were a lot of different beliefs.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they consolidated all these ideas and set creeds and what have you. Which is probably why those Gospels at Nag Hammadi that we discovered, in 1945, they probably buried them. A lot of them were leather-bound volumes, and more than likely in some monastery that was Gnostic. And when they heard that, I think it was Athanasius, I can't remember which bishop, in about the 3rd century, 2nd or 3rd, he started talking about how they were going to eliminate all these like false teachings and gospels and what have you. So what they did was probably just go out and bury them. It's quite remarkable because here they did appear in 1945. You know.
Bart Ehrman mentions those books. In his, who wrote the Bible?
I mean, I don't know if they're any truer than the Gospels about Jesus. I mean, I've read the Gospel of Thomas, and there's parts that sound like the biblical Jesus of the Christian Gospels, and then there's parts where Jesus sounds like this strange mystic that doesn't care about gender distinctions and stuff. I don't know, was this just their overlay, like our, the Christians' overlay on this Jesus figure, if he even existed, or did somebody that was wandering around as a preacher come up with these ideas? They would be very sophisticated. I don't, I've gone over it and over it. I don't have any answers, but it's very interesting.
Do you have an estimate of how many unique gods there have been in history?
Oh my gosh, no, that's interesting. I think there's a book that has tabulated how many gods. It's incredible. It's an enormous amount.
I would love to get that. Because, yeah, all of the South American gods, for example, are gone.
Yeah.
And these were advanced civilizations, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And everything before Christianity, almost every religion is gone.
But we do have some record of a lot of these gods.
So it would be good in debates to no account to say, well, all of these gods that were fervently believed in and worshipped, now today nobody has no contemporary worshipers.
That's really excellent. And I'm sure that there's a book or something, and somebody tried to tabulate it. But I'm sorry, it escapes me right now. But there were enormous amount, Okay. And the fact that I was just reading again today, and I've read it before, and I can't tell you exactly, but there's, apparently there's like 2 or 3 religions either every week or every month that still spring up.
You mentioned that.
Yeah, and then die out.
Mm-hmm.
There's an awful lot. People just come up with
I mentioned
things.
that those are spin-offs, Mary, that those aren't
Sure.
genealogical roots.
Yeah, I don't know how many would be original, but obviously, they have to grab onto you somehow. They have to be viable in some way.
And here's the big question for the evening, is if Spinoza had just heard your lecture,
Oh my gosh.
what would be his response or rebuttal to all of these arguments, or to the major ones? Where would he sit with these?
Well, I think it depends if you believe he's a pantheist or an atheist, but we do know that he believed that nature was a kind of a god unto itself. But here's the problem, and that's why people are still arguing, was an atheist or a pantheist. He believed that nature could not change its own laws. So that's not a really, really viable God, in the sense that, Christians and Judaism and Islam believe in a God.
But
It's
this
tricky.
idea of perfection, of all-knowing perfection, wouldn't he agree with these arguments in favor of God, that God is the ultimate perfection?
Sure.
He would
Sure,
say that that's
but it's so
the,
close to what he thought nature was, that he's muddied the waters so incredibly that I think that argument is just going to go on and on.
It seems to me he would be arguing in favor of God, in favor of this idea, because out of necessity in his worldview, that there had to be this ultimate, and the ultimate is called God.
Right.
That it is the perfection of everything that you might see in the world that's imperfect. God would be the perfect standard for it.
Well, that's more like a Platonic idea, or Neoplatonic. So I don't know that he really thought that. I think his God was more of a chthonic, kind of like almost I don't want to say underworld God, but not like a heavenly transcendent God. See, that's the trick. It's this God that inhabits like all the natural world, and like probably all the universe. It just, God is there. He's in this chair, he's in you. We're not necessarily imperfect. That when you get to imperfection, then you get to the Platonic idea. That there's this idea of chair somewhere in the cosmos or someplace, and that all these are copies that are imperfect. But I don't believe that Spinoza believed that. I think he believed that, everything is like working with God in it. But again, I hate to keep repeating it, but like, what kind of a God is it that can't change his laws? You know, there's passages in the Iliad where Zeus doesn't want some, you know, hero that he's especially fond of for one reason or other. And he, you know, the fates have decreed that this hero is going to fall today in this battle. And it drives him nuts. And, you know, some of the other goddesses that are on the side of, you know, like in one case he was on the side of a Trojan hero. And some of the goddesses like Athena and Hera that were for Greece, you know, we're going, you got to let this happen because it's your own laws. And he's like grieved and upset, you know, and he lets it happen. You know, he would take them up to, you know, like some kind of hero heaven or something, you know, but, or give them special treatment, because the Greek underworld was not very nice. You just wandered around as a shade. It was like really boring and depressing. But there again, you know, you have these primitive, you know, gods in mythology, and they cannot disobey the decrees of fate. That's it. Sorry, you know, it's too bad you love this hero. It's, you know, and almost Spinoza is almost in that. I don't want to compare him to mythology, because that would, you know, 80 philosophers would be down my throat. But you see, God can't change anything. So this is not this omniscient sky god. He inhabits everything. He can't change his own rules.
But that we as humans were supposed to work towards God, right? We were supposed to try and live up to something that Spinoza thought was the best of nature.
Yeah, or the best of societies. And remember, he very early, I mean, he's like one of the first philosophers writing about, you know, a liberal, tolerant society like we have now in the USA and Europe, and about, you know, equality for people, and he was way ahead of his time. This man was an incredible thinker, even if you don't agree, you know, that he might be, you know, a pantheist rather than an atheist. He certainly wasn't a theist, and that's probably why he was excommunicated.
Well, he wasn't a Jew in the sense of believing in all of the Jewish worldview. He certainly did not. Well,
there in Judaism and Christianity and Islam, you always have this like creator God someplace, you know. I mean, we don't think of it as heaven anymore. We don't even know where it is, but he didn't believe in that.
In any of the books that you read, did you find any kind of diagrams for all of these arguments, you know, from either based on a philosopher or based just on taxonomy of arguments of all of these concepts, which maybe could be boiled down to a small number of categories and then expanded upon within each category?
No, I didn't, except Mackey's book does that more or less, but not with diagrams, but, you know, with language.
Because that would be really helpful for a student to look at it from
the
point of view of a genealogy or taxonomy, where you're categorizing each argument into one category.
That's a brilliant, you know, it's interesting. If it hasn't been done, it should be. Right now, to my knowledge, you know, I think Mackey probably did the best job of it, but again, it wasn't charts.
Well, I really enjoyed all of the arguments that you gave us, because these are the fundamental ones, and I know that you couldn't include everyone.
Oh my gosh, there's so many.
This was very comprehensive nonetheless. There's a few more that came to my mind. I don't know.
Oh, good.
Somewhere these must be written down by someone. Is that God is undefinable, so you can't even ask the question, is there a God, because you don't even have the definition for God?
Right. You know, actually, that's really smart, Norm, because Thomas Aquinas tried to make that argument, and he did a pretty good job, because he was very clever, because what he was saying, that when we describe with all these terms that we describe God as, that they're analogical. You know, with our limited thing, we're using this limited vocabulary, and we're making analogies to what we think God may be. Yeah. And that was really very clever, because what happened then later with Duns Scotus and some of the other guys, they tried to like take reason away from faith, and they based, you know, faith in God as the important thing. And what happened was that it was like it had no underpinnings, and it became very weak, and slowly we're getting to where we are today.
Where you can make up whatever you want to believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That's finally what happened.
Yes. And Rabbi Wein would not openly call himself an atheist, at least last that I knew. So he would say pretty much the same thing, is that that's a definition we don't even have. He came up with some other fancy word.
It's funny because he's going right back to Thomas Aquinas, the famous Catholic theologian.
Okay.
I think it's a real smart argument.
And the corollary maybe is that God is unknowable, and because he's unknowable, of course he exists, because we cannot know otherwise. That he is such being so far beyond our comprehension that we can't even make the argument for his existence. But you know, that's circular as well, because you're making the argument.
Yeah.
by just making that statement.
Yeah.
And the argument from necessity, maybe you said this one, but this is the layman's term, is that there must be a God, because we need God both for an explanation as to what is, but also an explanation for the unexplained, for what we can't explain.
Yeah.
And then therefore it becomes a necessity to have a God.
But of course, as we get further along in science, we're realizing that there's an awful lot we can explain.
Yeah.
That's kind of like spoiling that argument a little bit, you know.
Yeah, but even, you know, when people are killed in car crashes, they say, well, this is God's will. This is, we can't explain why, but there must be a reason, and it must be attributable to God, therefore God exists.
Have you ever, I hate to go from the sublime to the banal, but have you ever, like, I saw an etiquette thing once, like what to say to people when, you know, a loved one or, you know, a close friend or something passes away, what to write in the sympathy thing. And honest to goodness, they said, you know, that like, whatever you do, don't say it was God's will. You know, this is very rude. And I'm going, well, why not? I mean, you know, it's got to be God's will or it wouldn't happen. But people don't like that.
You left out our friend from the Enlightenment about the best of all possible worlds.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Voltaire. So,
you
know, that this is the world that we have is because God has to put the pieces together to make everything balanced. Right? The best of all possible worlds. Would you say
Leibniz actually said that.
Leibniz,
I did mention Leibniz.
Voltaire made fun of it.
Yeah. He really exposed him to
Thank you.
huge.
Yeah, my mistake. Yeah, he made fun of the idea.
Well, it's not a mistake, no.
of
I
the best
should have
of-
probably, you know, elaborated on that a little bit
But even today, that argument continues, right?
more. Absolutely, because like, is this God's will or is it in God's? It seems to me that if you believe in this type of theistic God that I described, it's all-powerful, all-knowing, all-benevolent, blah, 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 that you would accept the fact that these bad things that happen are God's will. And yet, so many people don't. Then they go around, you know, they say they're angry at God. See, they don't say there's no God.
Yes.
And they're just saying, well, why are you angry? You know, he has this purpose somehow. You're going to find out after you die. I mean, what is all this?
Yeah, you can't find out now.
But see, they're making this bargain. You know, I had a really sad case. One of my customers, his wife, when she would come into the shop with him sometimes, and their son, one of their sons, luckily they had other children, but one of their sons had some kind of rare, you know, kind of genetic disease, and these things, you know, apparently just kill people by the time they're 22 or 3. I can't remember what the name of it was, and she just kept going over and over the fact that she was angry with God. She didn't care what her minister said, that they had been, and this was the clever thing, because she had made a bargain, obviously, with God, because she was saying, well, they didn't go out and drink and, you know, raised Cain and blah, 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 and they, you know, took care of their children properly, and, you know, everything in their household was correct and everything. So why had God done this when there's all these bad people? Why doesn't God take their kids, you know, in other
Well,
sense?
go read the Bible, because there's all kinds of examples.
Well, I
How to
just
deal with
listened,
that.
I didn't want to say anything to her because,
Yeah,
you know, what was I going to say? I mean, you know, they have this young
God
man
is
of
testing.
21 that could have his life ahead of him.
God is testing your faith.
Yeah,
God is saying, love me.
yeah, or the
This is
hidden
my way.
purpose, the hidden purpose.
This is, all will be made known to you.
But I'm struck by how many people get angry. It's not like they don't stop believing. They're just angry, like, you know, small children. It's kind of sad.
The counter argument, though, that's given to me about atheism is that we're just angry against God, and that's why we don't believe in God.
Yeah, how can we be angry at something we don't believe in? I mean, it's,
But their argument is that this is a reaction against being angry at God.
Yeah.
We decide that we don't believe in God because we've been hurt somehow, something bad happened to us, and suddenly, and this true with some atheists.
yeah, it is.
My friend John, this happened to him when his a family member died, and so he then decided that there was no God. So maybe there's some truth to that, but yeah, the accusation is, well, you just had a bad life, that's why you don't believe in
But
God.
see, that's not true. There's a lot of atheists that are perfectly happy and haven't had bad things happen to them.
Well, everybody's had something bad happen.
Well, yeah, but I mean, not much. I mean, you know. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a trauma that turns you into an atheist.
Right, I think they're trying to discount the idea that we're coming from a rational point of view.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
there's an excuse, they're making an excuse
Oh,
for
you're
it.
just mad, like you're a
Yeah.
little kid, you know.
Yes.
Yeah, and then you'll come back to God once you
Yes,
stop
yes.
being
Yeah,
angry.
once you grow up. Once you grow
grow
up.
up,
Once you get over this.
don't rebel against your father.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, they say things like that, like, well, I was like that when I was young.
Yeah,
I used to
when I
hear
was your
that
age.
when I was younger, you know.
Right.
Yeah, people used to say that.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, I went through that.
And then what happens?
Well, I guess then you come to your right mind, your senses, you stop rebelling, and then you believe in God like a normal, healthy person,
Yeah.
you know.
So to me, the basic question isn't, is there a God, but am I going to use faith or am I going to use reason to decide what is true?
Right.
See? So to me, the argument behind the argument is that we have to decide whether we're going to use faith or whether we're going to use reason to decide what's true.
Ah, but you see, Platinga is trying to say, I'm using reason,
Yeah.
I'm using logical reasoning,
Yes.
and we have warranted Christian belief. It's very clever.
Yeah, but behind all of these arguments, though, is this defense of religion, is
Mhm.
that if there is no God, then my religion goes away.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So no wonder they're so very willing to continually debate and offer
Oh,
the
yes.
arguments again and again, because it all falls apart, right?
Yeah, it
Without
does.
God,
It
there's no religion. So if there's
Yeah.
no religion, there's got to be a God, so
Yeah.
I can have my religion.
Yeah, it's very important to them, obviously, where they're like gonna fight it, you know, to tooth and nail over and over again.
But
I mean, I don't
in
think-
50 years, they won't even be here.
Yeah, they will.
Heresies. Come on, people.
Well, somebody else would be.
People have that,
Yeah.
have the faith, the idea of worship. I mean, it's.
But
It's not
then there's the
gonna go away.
utilitarian argument is that it doesn't matter whether God exists or not, he's useful anyway.
Right,
Oh,
He's
yeah.
useful,
Right.
Very good.
so let's not argue too much about it because he's so important to the masses
Right.
anyway.
It works for the masses.
Yeah,
Yes,
so who am
that's
I to
right.
say to take that
Right.
away from them?
right.
They're Santa Claus.
Because
Yeah.
what am I going to put in its place?
Yeah.
Because you have to have something.
Well, you know, I hate to say it, but my father was an atheist, but he believed that, you know, if people believed, you shouldn't take that away
Yeah.
unless you had something to put in its place.
This was very common.
He said, you know, a lot of people
Yeah.
would be very unhappy and, you know, it was not right to do that.
Yeah, and if you look at the communist dictatorships, that's what they said, they were gonna get rid of religion, now we are the masters, the religion.
Yeah.
The state is the religion,
Mhm.
so they substituted the state for the old religions.
Yeah,
But I really think that the bar has been raised for atheists, because in the past, maybe we just had to disprove that Christianity was true or not.
Yeah.
Now, the bar, you know, in this modern world is that, well, of course, all of these religions were just made up, but there is a God.
Yeah,
right?
that's the other thing, too.
There is a God, so the bar is much higher, because now we can't attack the history.
Yeah.
We have to attack this abstraction and say, of course there's they would say, of course there's a God, but these religions, that's what you're rebelling, that's what you don't like. You don't like all of these religions.
Well, a lot of people that are in the New Age spirituality have told me that. Well, you know, no, I never go to church.
Yeah.
You know, I really, hate religions. They're blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But I believe in some kind of creator, and then they're kind of vague about who this creator. I mean, it isn't the Christian God. It's some kind of energy, force, whatever. It isn't even necessarily the benevolent God. There's so many beliefs flying loose in the world right now. It's almost like kind of scary. I mean, does some religion come along that's going to like take precedence like Christianity did? Because that's what was going on in Rome, in the the Hellenistic world, and then the Roman Empire. You had again about a supermarket thing of gods and religions, and everybody did what what they wanted. And then, of course, Christianity triumphed, consolidated.
You think that could happen again?
I don't know. I suspect not, because we know so much about science now.
This word belief, to believe or to not to believe, is somewhat problematic. To say, well, an atheist doesn't believe in God. You're using the theist's vocabulary when you say that. When you say an atheist doesn't believe, or I do believe, or I believe that the sun will rise tomorrow, is not the same thing. It's not the same type of statement to say I believe that there's a God. See, so when I say that I believe the sun will rise tomorrow, I'm basing my conclusion on the physical reality that's tested and it's observed and it's calculated. So that word belief is much stronger. It should be, there should be another word maybe besides belief.
That's a good point.
But when you say I believe in God, that's a different type of belief that's not based in that type of facts. So you see, there's a bias even we're using their vocabulary to try and defend our point of view, so that people can then point the finger at us and say, well, you have a belief system. Mm-hmm. Your belief system is atheism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but see, we don't. That's why we say that we're not a philosophy.
But why use the word belief when we talk about God? Why say I believe, or why say I don't believe in God? That's actually, and I've said that many times myself, I don't believe in God. But why use their word to describe what we're saying is the rational position is that there is no God.
That's a good point. That's probably a better way to say it. Or I don't know if this is apocryphal or not, but didn't that mathematician Laplace, whatever, didn't he say? I think was it Napoleon who asked him something about
Laplace,
we heard that you don't believe in God, or do you believe in God, or something like that, and he said. I have no need of that hypothesis.
Yes.
And that's very good.
That's a very good explanation.
That's excellent. That is really excellent.
Well, I'm going to try myself to stop using the word believe.
That's a good point. In fact, you know what I hate to say? I hate saying I believe in evolution.
Yeah, it's not a belief.
Right.
Yeah, because it sounds like, like we believe something, whereas that too can be, that fact probably will change as we have more.
It changes. It might alter a little bit over the centuries.
Yeah, so, I mean, what do you believe in? Like this God of evolution? I mean, it's kind of silly.
Yeah.
But that's a good point. Yeah, I think we're using theist terms.
Well, look how it's crept into the vernacular. Belief. Oh, I believe in this garment.
Yeah.
I believe in this designer.
I believe in this painter. I believe in this artist. Come buy this painting. Or how about just believe?
Or the expression.
Just believe, so it implies some kind of loyalty.
Yeah, it's okay as long as you just believe. Yeah, then you're emotionally correct, and it doesn't matter what you believe in. It's kind of like, didn't Eisenhower say something about everybody should have some kind of religion or blah blah blah, and that they follow and believe in? And then he finished it with, "I don't care what it is."
Just believe.
Yeah, really, just believe.
Yeah, just believe.
just be a decent, well, the Catholic in the Nation, when I was reading about the Islamophobia, that silly stuff that they had printed in there, but it was funny because, again, they were after the Christians, you know, rather than Islam, because they were, she was upset over how creationism, you know, is being, you know, taught in the schools, or at least evolution is being neglected. And she said that her husband, apparently, who was a pretty prestigious sociologist, angers her because he refuses to pay attention to that. He thinks it's like a group identity when people say that. You know, the high figures, like that people say that they believe, you know, in creationism, and they don't believe. He says that that's group identity. What they're saying is that they're a good person, that they're a good citizen, and blah, blah, blah. This is what they've been taught to think. They don't necessarily reject evolution. They probably aren't even thinking about it. They're thinking about, you know, being like this good person that's a good American. Isn't that is fascinating to me? She said it drives her nuts. Yeah. But I got a new perspective when I, you know, heard that. Although I've been saying for years, I think those polls sometimes when they say, like, do you believe in God, I think people answer that just as yes, because again, they're saying I'm a good person. It's a cultural, identification. I'm a good person. You know, I'm not an atheist. Atheists do all kinds of bad things. You know, they steal, they lie. Yeah.
The prisons are just filled with it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
You know, another thing that maybe we could say is that everything is contingent.
Yes.
That this idea or these arguments, every single argument that we make for or against is all contingent on what we currently know.
Exactly.
And that's somewhat a humble and modest position to say, I'm discussing God in the contingency of what we now know, as a contingent to what history has taught us, what science has taught us. Everything is contingent.
It's very well stated. That's
Good.
excellent.
And
I like that.
Thanks. Yeah, and so it avoids this accusation, you know, that we're a religion or we're a belief system, or that we're jumping to some kind of conclusion out of emotion. We just don't like God. That we're trying to hurt people.
Yeah.
It's contingent on our known facts. This is what's known.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Okay, I mean that's all I had for comments on the arguments.
That's a full plate.
I wanted to.
Let me tell you.
There's a slight criticism I want to make about the first part of your lecture is on the you know, what is atheism, and you used the royal we quite a bit there.
Okay.
And I felt like there was some propagandizing going on in terms of atheism and what atheism was or is, you know, making the world a better place, and that we're open and we're joyful and we're, you know.
Well, I think I was trying to counter all the negatives about it.
Yeah, and there is a purpose in that. I think that there's importance to promoting atheism. I'm just not sure whether the lectures are the right place to do it.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
Because that was the only part that sounded very subjective.
Yeah, and it was very
part.
subjective, you know.
That's a spirit that I think that we can promote to the people who want more than just the education behind atheism.
Yeah.
That's my feedback.
No, I agree, I found, you know, the whole thing of what is atheism very difficult because everybody that's really good, Kruger, George Smith, Tom Flynn, I can't begin to name, you know, Michael Martin's written whole books on it. I mean, I didn't feel that I was, you know, really equipped to discuss atheism in the way that these, you know, better people have. So, you know, I've put their books in the AtheistScholar.org, from Julian Beginning with his little short introduction, which is very good, by the way, and Kruger and Smith, and then, you know, some of the heavier hitters like Martin. And so I just put in like what I felt about atheism, to tell you the truth.
What about the Case Against God by, I think that's Eller, David?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I've looked at his thing, but he hasn't, to me, he isn't saying anything any newer than what the other people I've mentioned. You know, you get to a certain point where you can't say very much new about atheism. I mean, I haven't seen anything very much new. You know, Martin has very complex philosophical arguments, but those aren't appropriate, you know, for the general group of people. I mean, you have to, you know, you have to be a philosopher yourself, practically.
Is it true that the people who did not believe in the virgin birth, they were called atheists?
Yeah, this is the thing, you see.
But they were Christians.
Yeah, they were Christians, so really they were more like apostates or heretics or whatever. There's like definitions, and yeah, they were, but they were just called sometimes atheists to really discredit them.
And the word
so we have no idea if they really didn't believe in God or not.
See, they may have believed in God, but they didn't. They believed in God from their perspective, not from the dogmatic perspective of the Roman Catholic Church.
But they believed in Christ, though.
Oh, they believed in
sometimes,
Christ.
but sometimes they didn't.
Sometimes they didn't. Sometimes they didn't believe that Christ was the Messiah.
Yeah.
But he was a philosopher, or he was a prophet, and he gave us this and that, and how to live and so forth. But and then people against the Trinity. People did not accept the Trinity for years and years and years and years.
And the virgin birth.
And the virgin birth, and they had to have all these conferences and work out these rules and so forth.
Well, during the Renaissance.
If you were on the wrong side of the rulemaking.
Yeah, but you were called an atheist.
Yeah.
And they knew, though, that the literal meaning of the word.
I think, yeah, I think that they did, but it was like,
you know,
worse to call the guy the atheist.
Yeah.
But sometimes they would call them heretics or blasphemers. I think whatever the torturers and interrogators would come up with, and then they would send into court.
Yeah.
I think it wasn't very, what am I trying to say, laid out completely, you know, like I think that they had witch books later that laid out what made a witch. But I don't think, I'm not sure if they had like, what is a atheist, what is a blasphemer. I don't think that they had that. I think it was at the whim of, you know, whatever court you were brought before, or, you know, whatever ecclesiastical.
What's going to sell to the judges?
Oh yeah, what will sell to the judges, what people wanted to hear at the time. I mean, there's whole testimony. Christopher Marlowe was maybe a spy, and he was also probably a heretic in some ways during the Renaissance. He wrote Faustus and different plays about the same time as Shakespeare. He had a circle of friends, and some of them, he would be arrested but always released. That's why people thought that he was in cahoots with the government. But friends of his, there's all kinds of testimony, and there's apparently a lot of joking among you know, a small group of friends that trusted each other somewhat about, you know, that the Virgin Mary was probably a loose woman, you know, that they didn't accept the thing. So there was a lot of, you know, obviously skepticism. And they were talking about it, you know, not openly, but surely among themselves.
And so if you didn't believe in Christ, you were basically an atheist.
Oh, yeah.
There's only one true God. And if you believed in some other God or some other interpretation, then you didn't believe in God.
Yeah,
well,
the danger of that is you're not accepting the divinity.
Yeah.
Not accepting
Jesus is
divinity.
Remember, Jesus is God.
God the Father and the Holy Ghost.
That was laid down about with, it was an Arian, which I can't remember which bishop. It was either Arian or Athanasius. One won and the other one lost. But they laid down, because they argued in council after council, the nature of God. And that was really important. If you remember, it's in the Baltimore Catechism. Anybody who's read the Baltimore Catechism, we used to have to memorize it when I was in girls' Catholic school. Yeah, amen, Jim says. You know, like what exactly was the nature of the Trinity, and you better have it right. I can remember, because I was always good at memorizing things, and the nuns used to reproach the Catholic kids that, you know, here I was ostensibly this Orthodox child, and look how she has this down, and the rest of you, you know.
Yeah. The atheist.
Yeah, blasphemers, you know. And I used to sit there very primly, you know, and smile. You know, I was a terrible child, you know. But, you know, it's just so hard to, like, come up with what people believed until you had Baron de Holbach and people like that, finally, in the Enlightenment. that said, you know, I don't believe this, I don't believe that, you know, system of nature.
And that was as soon as they got the freedom to even say that.
Yeah.
They said it.
Yeah.
See,
Yeah.
up until that point, you would be murdered.
Fried.
Yeah. Well, you could still be murdered about then, but it was, things had really loosened up.
Yeah, the brave ones began to speak. And then the term agnostic, I noticed that you avoided that. Is that going to be covered?
Oh, I put it in a little bit. I put it in a little bit. Well,
Well,
they're
the
not
history-
atheists, and we're doing atheism, you know.
But is that going to be covered at all in another lecture, or are you going to just?
No, actually, you know, I maybe at some point, you know, in lectures that I haven't worked out yet. I mean, I have a
Because
long line of like topics that I'm going to, but
The
how would
history
it-
and the usage would be very enlightening,
Wow.
you know, because it's a new word, it's relatively new.
Well, I think, wasn't it coined by Huxley
Huxley in the mid-19th
in the
century.
defense of like Darwin, I think.
So it's a new word
Yeah, it
by my
is.
standards, and it was a word that was politically motivated.
Mhm.
So I think it's important to cover it.
Okay, I'll try. I don't know if it would make like an hour lecture,
No, no.
you know, but yeah, it might be.
In the context of whatever era that you're covering, you know, the 19th century, if you're covering history,
Oh, okay.
even Darwinism,
Okay.
evolution would be important.
Okay, that is interesting, actually.
Good, okay.
Yeah, I'm not that against agnostics, you know.
Well, for or against, it doesn't matter, it has a history.
Yeah, it
It's
does.
important.
I don't think it's like enough of a history, though. Isn't it just connected to humanism? Sometimes,
You tell me,
atheism
I don't
can
know.
be too.
Yeah.
I think that it's connected a lot with the humanists, you know.
But there's religious humanists, as you, or there
Yes,
used to be.
Yes,
yes,
there
there
are.
are. Yes, there are
So
still.
you pointed that
Still
out
are.
in the history of
Yes.
atheism, so.
Yes.
it's
Those
important
the
to-
nuns who are arguing with the Pope could certainly be considered religious humanists.
Humanists, yeah, they're not atheists. Yeah. Very good. Thank you, Mary Ann.
Pascal's bargain.
Oh, yeah.
And that was along the lines of what you were saying, and then we kind of drifted, and I wanted to get back to that. That's exactly what he said, and that's a lot of people do now.
Pascal's wager.
Yeah, wager, thank you, not
Mhm.
bargain, wager, yeah. That, you know, there's, if you believe in God, and at least try to believe in God, there's, even if maybe you don't, there's no harm in it. You know, you're not doing anything wrong, and if there is a God and there is an afterlife, then, you know, you're going to be, you know, you're going to get in, and, you know, so it may have a positive benefit. It certainly isn't gonna hurt anything, that's kind of the thing. And I think
And-
people still take that stand.
And he was crazy. He had a lot of
Yeah.
mental issues
Yeah, yeah.
himself.
Yeah.
He was also a brilliant scientist. But
Yeah.
Yeah. When I was 17, really deciding whether I was an atheist or not, that certainly came to my mind. And I don't know if I even knew of Pascal at that time, but I knew of this idea of, well, is this insurance?
Yeah.
Just
Well,
in
insurance
case.
policy.
Yeah.
But I reached a different conclusion, because they said, well, the God of the Old Testament is a bad God.
Yeah, he really is.
Someone that,
Mm.
if he does exist, he's not worthy of my devotion.
You're absolutely right,
Because
yeah.
remember, it's not done in a vacuum, this idea of God. If there is a God, then there's something that we owe to him.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
for my mind, at that time, in 17, in the library, I was thinking about this, is that, well, if God does exist, he's evil. If he exists, he's a bad God. And
Yeah,
he's
well,
a-
he had these childish, like
Yeah.
I've said, these childish rages, he'd wipe out a whole city.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing good about him,
And
really.
then, so if he's a bad God, he's not worthy of
Yeah.
my devotion. And the consequences that I see on the planet right now of not being devoted to God are very little. I don't see any real consequences of not believing.
No,
And once I could get over that fear of not believing in this evil God, then I could let go of God and say there is no God. 'Cause
that's
there's
fantastic,
no
what a
consequence.
transition.
But it's
You know,
somewhat
isn't that
like
interesting?
Yeah, thanks. But it's the reverse of Pascal, who said this is insurance. It's like I had to figure out that I wasn't going to get hurt by not believing.
Ah, that was like, what was her name at
She
the
went to the
atheist
kitchen.
convention?
Taslima Nasser.
Away from the family, yeah.
She tested.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
A
tested.
much younger age than I was.
Yeah.
That was funny. I mean, that never occurred to me.
Yeah, to test this proposition.
Yeah.
And that, of course, yeah, her mother would have been outraged, but this was what was a logical test.
Her mother might have been really frightened.
Or even frightened,
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I remember my grandmother always used to tell me when I would ask questions like that, because she was religious, unlike my parents, and when she would hear me ask, these like existential questions, as it were, like, she would always tell me about this crazy woman who naturally had my name in the village, Tala Maria, which means crazy Mary, and she had gotten that way from asking all these like difficult questions, and her mind had become addled, and that's always a warning too. You're going to go crazy, or you're going to unsettle your mind. Yeah, you're going to unsettle your mind.
I heard that.
Did you hear that too?
Yes.
What did you hear?
Same thing.
From your mother or other people?
Relatives.
if you didn't believe in God.
No, your
Well, you ask
question.
questions.
If you ask questions, you go crazy.
Yeah.
Why? That person was nuts.
Yeah.
Person crazy.
Did they recite somebody that they
Some
use?
third cousin, some third cousin.
What
What they're
crazy.
doing is they're saying, stop bothering me with all these questions.
'Cause I can't
even begin to
answer
answer.
Yeah, I don't have.
Have faith.
Yeah. It might scare them too, because they can't answer it.
Yeah.
So it was a tranquilizer to say, stay calm.
Yeah.
This one direction of not asking the question.
Yeah, it's a threat too, I mean, in a way. I mean, you're gonna like get crazy and
You're gonna
act
go nuts.
funny. I mean, that's a scary thing.
Yeah.
Actually, I never took
Fantastic.
it very seriously, thank goodness, but I'm sure some kids do, maybe they stop asking.
Yeah.
And another thing that I wanted, because I wanted to get back to the Renaissance, because I took a wonderful class from, professor, I don't think he's at Wayne anymore, Len Tenenhouse, who was an expert in Shakespeare. And he was explaining to us in The Merchant of Venice that, we had to understand the Elizabethan mind at that time. So to us, in the modern world, when Shylock gives that wonderful speech, does not a Jew bleed, and, blah, 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 he's saying that the Christian community at that time, because the Jew did not accept Christ, and that was not part of that community of Christ, that they'd say, yes, but. You're not really the same. Len was a Jew too, so but he was trying to explain that so we would understand what was going on in that play.
Yeah. Well, was Shakespeare trying to actually argue for the rights of Jews?
That's the question. That's what Len brought up. Was he trying to? Was it a?
Because I read it as very sympathetic. My mother
I
thought
did too.
it was anti-Semitic.
Oh, well, she was maybe
She-
right.
She didn't like, no, this is what she was brought up on,
Oh.
that Shakespeare was an anti-Semite, but that you
Oh, I
read the
don't think
play.
he was. No, he wasn't.
It's sympathetic to Shylock.
Yeah, no, he was much too sophisticated to, be
Anti-Semite.
anti-Semite. Yeah.
Yeah,
This
my
is
mother
okay.
was not sophisticated.
No.
Yeah.
But that speech is ambiguous, and there is a lot of ambiguity in Shakespeare. It's like the King plays. There's enormous ambiguity, even though, there's all this, putting up of kinghood. If you notice some of the speeches, they're very ambiguous concerning, war and, the trappings of kinghood and everything. In fact, we should probably look for that in Henry V.
Oh, yeah. It's full.
Yeah, that's a good one, yeah. Yeah,
So-
ambiguities.
The final question of the evening is, can you anticipate a time in the next couple hundred years when there's the widespread understanding or acceptance of no God? Could you anticipate that even 500 years from now, that on this planet there would be that understanding among most people that there is simply no God?
Maybe. Maybe.
I think that the education system has to improve in order for that to take place. And what I see right now is a deterioration of the education. So you have the general education. We're moving in a direction of educating only the people who have money.
But is that the key then, is they just need to be better educated? And that makes people not believe?
A lot of well-educated
I
people
think
believe.
a lot of well-educated people believe, but you you have a better chance if you start using rationality.
Katha Pollitt was making the point, and I think that Prothero, who writes on evolution, I think that a lot of people have made the point that actually evolution, if it's taught at all in our public schools, is like 1 or 2 classes. A lot of teachers teach it, they don't connect it with biology, and they don't even teach it at all. And I know I had a great biology teacher, but he never connected it to evolution. I think he wanted to stay away from that.
You didn't cover evolution?
No, we just covered biology, and he did a
Well,
wonderful job. Yeah, I know.
Biology is evolution.
Yeah, evolution is the root, but they just leave that out, I think, because they don't want to be challenged by parents and have all that hassle. So this is going on in American classrooms all over the country.
Yeah.
Our kids are hardly getting any evolution. That's the real truth of it. And apparently, I don't know where she got her figures from, but about 13% of classrooms are still teaching creationism, and nobody's complaining, you know, they're afraid of reprisal, they don't want to have the community against them. Yeah, so these people that take lawsuits and everything are really brave, you know, but the real truth is still 13% where creationism is still, I believe this, a little pocket here in the South. If you look at we get the newsletter for Americans United, they've always got some case going, or 2 or 3 cases. It's insane. I mean, they're causing us to waste money on their stupid lawsuits. I mean, they're going to lose.
Wow.
So it's pathetic. Yeah, and Prothero, too, says that, you know, the state of really what's being taught about evolution in our schools is just really pathetic.
Wow.
So that's the reality. I mean, you know, we talk about, well, no, it's free to take, you know, but they're not.
Well, this is why some extracurricular activity is necessary. We can't depend on the schools, at least in this case, Jim, to teach real science. We have to have an outside, you know, like Dawkins' book, Magic of Reality, or something for children that educates them. Maybe it's the internet. Maybe it's something on the internet that educates them. Because if the schools aren't doing the job, someone else should.
Well, I think just recently, didn't Dave Silverman say that he thought that the web had done an awful lot?
For atheism.
Especially like the young people that are looking at, I think, I'm paraphrasing, so I hope I'm not, you know, not stating his position well, but I think what he said is before, when you were an atheist in many areas, you were alone. You were just an atheist. I mean, and, you know, everybody else you thought was around you was, maybe they weren't, you know, like believers, but nobody was coming out of the closet. And now, like a young person approaching it goes to the web. And, you know, we have, we know some people, and their young daughter, well, she's not young anymore, she's a college grad, but when she was in high school, she was at a very prestigious high school, which I will not name, and there were hardly any people that didn't believe there. So she felt very isolated, and then, you know, she hit the web, and she found all these atheist websites, and it was just like an opening up for her. Fortunately, they were very tolerant. They're kind of like very, very weak theists. And she asked them if they minded, you know, and they told her no, you know. If she didn't want it.
But isn't that the real risk over the long term, is that there's just going to be this nebulous idea of God that's impenetrable, that we won't be able to crack because it's so ill-defined that you can't even pose much of an argument.
Boys know smart. Yeah, that's good, because that's what we're getting to with the New Age stuff.
Yeah. Isn't it?
Yeah.
Then it'll be so loosely the nature God is that you can't really attack it, you can't grab hold of it.
Yeah, it's some kind of energy, and I believe it, because you just should believe something, blah, blah.
Here it becomes very important to have AtheistScholar.org and all kinds of outlets like that.
All the
there
websites.
should be 10 of these, 20 of these sites.
But there are a lot of sites.
Yeah.
I mean, that,
this should be
not
available.
What we're doing.
Well, maybe not what we're doing.
What the other ones
I
are.
think that we should encourage that. It's like working with NoCirc. You have to get the information out.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately you will, but I agree with you that you're never really going to get rid of it 100%.
I don't see it. I would like to see it. I would like to see it. I mean, sometimes when you tell atheists that, they think that, you know, I don't know, you're like wishing ill on atheism or something, or you're a traitor to atheism or something. It's almost that. But, I mean, you have to be realistic about it, too. I mean, I don't know if we can eradicate it.
But what you can do is encourage the expansion of the rationality.
You know, I don't want to talk about this theory too much because I'm going to do it in anthropology, and plus I just finally stumbled on it, and among other anthropological theories, and this is kind of more of a sociological theory, but it's called, they have all these new terms for like being scared and believing in God, but they're calling, I think, terror management. I think
terrorism?
Yeah, no, they mean real fear of dying.
Personal terror.
Yeah, and a personal terror. Thank you, Jim. That's really good. Personal terror. Yeah, and it's really funny. And that belief in God helps with that terror management. And I think that that's pretty funny. You know, like bad things happening to good people, as it were. You know. Yeah. So I don't want to elaborate on it because, like I said, I'm going to cover it in another lecture. Plus, I don't think I have the ability right now to do it properly. But that I was amused when I stumbled on that today.
But if we raise children in a more safe environment, feelings of safety and acceptance and love, then the need for God begins to wane, right?
That's right. That's wonderful because that's what's happened in the West, except for the United States. We're an anomaly in a way, but those societies up to now, I don't know what's going to happen with all the immigration that they've experienced, but they've had relatively stable societies. People haven't been real worried about losing their jobs. There's been fairly stable economies. Now everything's kind of getting roiled up, you notice. I don't know what that'll do. But you notice belief in religion went way down.
Yeah.
Enormously.
Yeah, and it continues to be. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's going to continue.
I hope so. I hope so.
In fact, the Iraqis tried to ban some of the press, some of the newspapers and the radio. They actually tried to unlicense. Everyone has to be licensed to publish.
Oh, yeah.
And they tried to ban them, and then there was an outcry, and now that they've said, okay, we'll give you a license to publish, which means it can be revoked.
I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, like, how often does it get made? Don't they arrest, publishers frequently in those areas?
They're harassing them. Yeah, now did you look at any of the Jewish arguments, or were most of them from the Christian perspective?
Most of them were like from Christian theologians. Yeah,
that's another thing I'd love to see.
That's another. Whoa, boy.
Because the Jews were faced with the post-Holocaust questioning. It's theodicy again, right? But there was a lack, there was a loss of belief after the Holocaust. The Jews gave up God.
But a lot of them didn't, and that's what amazes me. I'm like Elie Wiesel and people like that. I mean, they're like big-time theists. And Frankl, the psychologist.
Frankl, he wasn't a theist.
He was a theist. He was a theist. Yeah, I read his book, and he was like a vague theist, but yes, he was a theist.
Freud wouldn't have approved of that.
Yeah, no, not at all. But Frankl had been through the camps.
Yeah.
And he still retained a certain amount of theism. Yeah.
Right.
It wasn't strong, but it was there. And Wiesel, I think, is fairly religious. I can't imagine me going through a horror like that and surviving. And believing that there was a God. I mean, I don't even understand it.
And what utility then?
But you're telling me that there was a falling off of belief then.
Well, all I can say is there was a great deal of writing or work published about this. Where was God? Where was God in the Holocaust? There was a great deal of investigation going on, and the rise of the Jewish atheist came after World War II. That's when there was a great deal of abandonment. That how could there be a God? The people who didn't survive the Holocaust, who just were children, growing up at that time, grew up to discard God. So it could no longer be taken as a serious possibility when you have 6 million Jews died in 4 years.
Well, I know I wouldn't believe in God, I mean, but I guess some people, if you believe that, because I've heard theologians say this, like on television and things like, well, God doesn't want this kind of like evil behavior, and it's usually like people, killing each other. People do this, God does not want it. They're in violation of, what God wants. God is love,
But he
okay,
didn't
thanks.
intervene.
Well, I guess they don't have an answer for that other than these hidden purposes that we just went over tonight,
Well, the Orthodox said, well, this is God's punishment, because the European Jews, especially the German Jews, were secular. That this is God's punishment for drifting away from Judaism, is that he had to teach the Jewish people to return. Isn't that crazy?
It
All
sounds
the
like-
earthquakes are caused by being gay. in the
Yeah,
United
that
States.
sounds like Ezra after the Babylonian captivity.
Ezra had to find a reason
Yeah.
to continue to believe.
And he put in circumcision too, heavy duty,
To
from what I
return.
understand,
Yeah, so you can tell that throughout history, the Jews were
Yeah.
abandoning circumcision off and
Yeah.
on.
But let's get back to basics,
Let's
I
get
think
back
he
to
said,
it, yeah.
because, God
Yeah.
has punished us
Right.
because we drifted.
This is very good, Mary.
Thank
I
you.
learned a lot. So I would love for atheism to become that force that would continue to pull people away and say, you see, your God is of no use to you as a concept, has no utility. That to say you believe in God has no purpose because he's never going to intervene in any of your life, no matter how bad things get.
But they don't seem to care. I mean, did you see people when, in New Orleans, after the hurricane? I mean, there were people that were like building their houses and they would, like rebuilding their houses, poor people, with all that slime and crap around, and they would interview them and they'd go, my faith in Jesus keeps me going. Huh?
It's ultimately
I'd be pretty mad right now,
Yeah. Yeah, so maybe I'm too optimistic.
No, I mean, I think that, secularism is growing.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to
But
be.
it will never dominate.
You don't think it'll ever dominate?
No. No, it will dominate. It could dominate, but like it could be 60-40,
I mean, because it's starting to
70-30.
become dominant in many countries in Europe.
Yeah, 70-30, but I would count on it because there'll always be a core
Yeah.
of belief, I believe. I think it's always going to be.
Well, it wouldn't bother me, so much. We should have like free and open societies for people to believe what they want. But they try to impose those beliefs on the rest of us. And they try to have them made into law. They want theocracies.
And there are people that we know within the atheist community, you better watch out if they get in the car. Head for the nearest exit.
So can there be an atheist philosophy that's beyond simply there is no God? What is it? Is it humanism that I'm talking about? What would draw people together in a more ideal community?
I think that a lot of atheists embrace like humanism and naturalism, and those two serve.
Yeah.
But there's so many atheists that have different philosophies.
How has that emerged? The American humanists, are they any bigger now than they were 10 years ago?
No, I don't think so, no.
So I'm hoping that something will emerge that will pull people away from religion, and towards making the better world. That all the things you said in the beginning, which is the ideal, but is certainly not necessary to being an atheist.
Well, I noticed that, the hits on the first part of my lecture, on the 2 lectures on philosophy, the hits are much heavier on the humanist, naturalist areas, and much less interest, well, not much, but less interest in the existential and what have you. So I think that really, as of right now, naturalism and humanism, are the thing. I don't know what would pull us. I think that secularism, though, is showing a growth. I think that people are, what were the latest figures what were the figures about young people, I think under 30?
It's enormous.
Yeah, it's very large.
30%,
Wasn't it like...
are unaffiliated.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that they're not sure of the existence of God. I think it's
Yeah.
very high.
It's 22% or so.
Yeah, or 30, I thought, or something.
That's
I mean, of course, they're
enormous.
not saying they're atheists,
Yeah.
but all of a sudden they're not sure.
But the Christians say, oh, that's because they haven't had children yet, they're still immature. Once
That's
they-
because God keeps moving further away in the heavens.
Yeah, or because they were taught about the dinosaurs in school.
No.
So, but no, I think most of them will stay atheists for their lives.
Yeah, yeah.
So you can predict, yes, we're gonna continue to grow, but what does that growth look like? Doesn't sound like we're gonna have community centers as atheists, because we can't get them together.
I think less of atheist and more of secular.
Well, what does that look like, Jim? Is that just everybody's?
Don't call it
sitting down
atheist, call it secular, do the
Well-
same thing, but call it secular.
Well, it'll be kind of, I think maybe there'll be a lot of post-atheism. I
That's a
noticed
good-
that a
that's a
lot
good
of people,
phrase,
like
post-atheism.
in our son's crowd and everything, yeah, if you ask them, they're atheists, but they're really kind of like indifferent to the issues.
But isn't that dangerous as well?
Yeah, I think it is,
It's a
but they don't
concern.
feel it is, that they feel like it's, not,
And that's why you got Proposition 8 in
well,
California.
that's it, that's
They
it.
don't- They thought they were.
But I
immune.
mean, I talked to, heterosexual people in that crowd. Michelle, our grandson's girlfriend, and she's a very, firm atheist, but she's just not interested. It's just junk, I mean, as far as she's concerned. She's a nursing student, so she knows,
Yeah.
science a little bit.
But it goes back to that question, does the truth matter? Even asking the question, you're assuming that the truth matters to her. Maybe it doesn't matter to her.
Well, I think she feels she has her own truth. She just doesn't believe
She's
it.
got to work out this, that there's no
Yeah.
God, and
Yeah.
in addition to that, the people who do believe are no threat to her.
Right, right. But of course, I don't know, I think that they are.
Yeah.
I mean, they're scary a lot of
But even if
times.
they weren't, if the truth matters, then isn't it important to share that truth and not just keep it to yourself?
Yeah, I think so, but
I
not all
think you
people.
can share it without proselytizing.
But I mean, all people do, I mean, like, this is terrible, but like Dimitri and George didn't even know she was an atheist because they didn't even care.
Yeah.
It's just when I was talking to her one night, we were at a party that their friends had, and we were just sitting on the couch talking and everything like that, and Dimitri and George didn't even know.
But then why should we care? Why should we care whether we're an atheist?
Well, I think I care. I mean, I care because I can see these threats all the time.
Yeah.
We subscribe to all these, publications and what have you. And also we've come from the generation where we know how scary the Christians can be.
But if the threat wasn't there, say you're living a very comfortable upper class life, and there's, you have all the comforts that you need.
See, that's the problem, yeah.
Why would you care? I think I would still care, just like I care to know about evolution. I care to know about the world. But how do we reply to people who say, well, it doesn't really matter?
I don't know. I mean, you live a very comfortable upper
Yeah.
middle class life, and it matters to you, but then, there are certain pockets in this country that they really feel that they've gone beyond atheism, if they even want
Yeah.
to discuss it.
Yeah, is that because they're afraid of offending people?
No, I think that they're just indifferent to
It just
it.
doesn't
They're-
matter?
They're hanging
But
out
why-
in a milieu where it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but it just seems rather odd.
It
because
seems silly to me too, but there they are.
They're still faced with all the same existential questions of,
Yeah,
what do I do with my life? Do I matter? Do I
yeah.
make a difference? What's right? What's wrong? All of those things are real questions.
I agree, I agree.
And to say I don't care or it doesn't matter, it's bizarre. I've never understood that.
It's kind of hard to understand, but I think that, there's some sociologists think that we're moving in that direction.
Of apathy.
Yeah. Well, in fact, I'll be doing sociology, in July.
We're gonna get
So-
Mike here for that.
Yeah. So we'll be covering that, because there's
Okay.
like several theories of secularism
Yeah, it would be
that
very
are
interesting.
current in the society, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, people are working on that, but, nobody knows for sure. What's going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, what if you had another Robert Ingersoll who was going around the country with large crowds?
Yeah.
Maybe Dawkins is doing some of that.
Yeah.
But he's British. He's not very charismatic.
Yeah, no.
He's kind of stiff.
Yeah.
I think he's passionate, but it's in his own way. What if we had several of these type of people going around the country, stirring up the crowd?
That would be great, but remember Ingersoll was an agnostic.
Well, okay, but he was an educator.
Yeah.
He was educating people.
Yeah.
That's right.
You know.
Yeah. I don't know, at that time, though, remember that was a means of entertainment, people going to lectures, and I do remember, because I used to read Louisa May Alcott when I was a young girl, all her Little Women and all the sequels and what have you, and people would discuss that, I have to get ready for the lecture, or we're going to the lecture, can you watch the children, Now, of course, these people weren't wealthy in this family, but they were like well educated, and they came from a more patrician class. They were just kind of like, not doing well financially, but they were going. So this was now we don't really have lectures as entertainment anymore. We have TV and the web. So what we've got to do is maybe get somebody on the telly.
Yeah.
Or get somebody on the web.
Yeah, or get somebody.
Keep putting people.
We have a lot
on
of people on the web that the kids follow. I mean,
Keep putting up people on the web.
They had salons, right? The turn of the 20th century.
Well, yeah, but these kind of people that I'm talking about in the USA, they very seldom went to salons. Like Mabel Dodge had salons in New York. These were people who were really wealthy that had salons.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the kind of middle to upper middle class people I'm talking about just didn't have that kind of thing.
But they would go to a lecture, and then what day of the week would that be on?
It could be during a weekday or something like that, but there was an enormous amount. People would even travel miles, to like go to a lecture. I mean, it's like kind of sad now because people are really lazy.
Frederick Douglass did that too.
Yeah. But remember, you didn't have radio, you didn't have television. I mean, people point that out. I think Bertrand Russell talked about that very amusingly, that, like a happy family time was like sitting around and the girls would embroider, and if they were lucky, something, because they would expurgate Shakespeare, so all the, questionable parts were taken out.
Really?
Yeah, so, and the father might read Shakespeare or something like that, And I do see that in the Jane Austen novels. It's kind of like, if you were unlucky and say like a relative was visiting who was like a clergyman or something, they would usually like try to read sermons and stuff. There was a lot of that. Really nice. Sorry to drift from that.
Time to go.